take so much for granted, like birth, life, death. It just is what it is. But what if it's not quite as straightforward as that?
Well, there's always been this fascination, hasn't there? With what, if anything, lies beyond those bookends.
Yeah, and one of our sources today, this Philosophical Essence video we found, they even call it like a carefully constructed illusion, which is kind of a wild thought. They even mention secret societies, like maybe they're in on something the rest of us aren't.
Well, that's what we're going to deep dive into today, see what they have to say.
Right, like the big picture stuff, birth and death, but not just from, the usual angles. We're talking quantum physics, ancient traditions, near-death experiences, even some pretty cutting-edge science. It gets out there.
And our mission, think of it like this. We're going to sift through it all, find the real gems in this video, and try to connect those dots for you. Maybe you'll even have one of those aha moments.
All right, so strap yourselves in. First up, quantum physics. And I gotta warn you, it's about to get weird. Because they're saying time isn't what we think it is. Not a line, but more like a vast ocean. Every moment, past, present, future, it's all happening at...
Yeah, this is where it really challenges how we normally think, right? We experience time so linearly, one moment after the other. But quantum physics kind of throws that out the window. And what's really wild is if every moment is happening together, then the past you regret, the future you're scared of, they're not gone or not here yet. They're all part of this vast ocean of time accessible from the present. It's trippy.
Seriously, we've got particles that can be in two places at once already. That's hard enough to wrap your head around. But then they talk about experiments where what a particle does in the future can change what it did in the past. It's like rewriting history, but in reverse.
Which completely messes with our idea of cause and effect. We think A happens, then B happens because of A, then C happens because of B. But here, they're suggesting this connection between all points in time, and then there's entanglement, where two particles, miles apart, they act like they're instantly connected. The video calls it a timeless whole. It's like this deeper level of reality where our normal ideas of space and time, they just don't apply.
Okay, so if time is this fluid thing, what does that even mean for birth and death? Like, those seem pretty final. But the video says, well, maybe they're not the hard stops we think. Maybe they're more like doorways or transitions.
Yeah, more like moving between rooms in a really, really big house. And if all these moments are all existing together, maybe what we think of as death is just our awareness shifting in this bigger picture, this kind of quantum tapestry of existence. It's not escaping death. It's more like understanding it's not the end, just a change in this much, much larger reality.
And that gets to this question of, can we learn to tap into these other moments or reality? The video even hints at something like developing a skill of suddenly living forever, which I'm not sure I even understand, but it's definitely thought.
And it makes you think about your existence beyond, those dates on your tombstone, that there might be this connection to something way bigger and way more mysterious than we usually imagine.
So quantum physics definitely stretches the brain, but let's bring it down to earth. This thing about kids who seem to remember past lives.
Right, and what's so fascinating is the level of detail. Like the video tells this story of a 2-year-old boy having nightmares about being shot down in a plane in World War II. And he knows all these things about the plane, things he shouldn't know at that age.
Yeah, and that's where the video highlights Dr. Ian Stevenson, who studied this for decades, something like 2,500. And he didn't just take their word for it. He checked everything they said against historical records, interviews with people who were alive back then, really thorough.
And that's the key, because, of course, you wonder, is it just imagination? Are the parents putting ideas in their heads? But Dr. Stevenson looked for cases where the kids knew stuff their families couldn't have told them. Plus, sometimes there's physical evidence, birthmarks, or even birth defects that match up with what the kids say happened to them in their past life. That's hard to explain away.
For sure. Like, the girl who remembered being a singer could sing these specific songs, do these dances no one had ever taught her. Or the boy who took researchers to his, past life's grave. Described landmarks he shouldn't have known.
So think about it. Have you ever had déjà vu or a fear of something you can't explain? Maybe some talent that just came out of nowhere. The video suggests maybe those are echoes, glimpses of other lives you've lived. Kind of changes how you think about your own story, doesn't it?
Makes you wonder if there's way more to it than just this one life. And then the video gets into this even wilder idea from, they call them rare documents and taboo spiritual traditions, that some people, like really advanced souls, they can actually plan their next life.
Which is a pretty radical concept.
Yeah.
Because that would mean we have a choice in it. We don't just die and whatever happens, happens. We can actually choose the circumstances of our next life. If that's true, death becomes something completely different.
Well, speaking of transitions, let's talk near-death experience. The classic floating above your body, seeing the light. The video tells Rachel's story, her car crash, she sees this bright light, even meets her grandma who'd passed away.
And these stories, they're surprisingly common. across all sorts of cultures, background. And while science says, oh, it's just the brain doing weird stuff when you're close to death, those who have NDEs, they say it feels so real, so vivid. They talk about leaving their body, the light, this incredible peace, seeing loved ones.
And a lot of them, their lives change afterwards, right? They're
Yeah.
less afraid of death, more spiritual, more compassionate, less materialistic.
Exactly. And that gets back to our theme here. NDEs, they're like a glimpse through that doorway the video talks about. They suggest that consciousness, it doesn't just disappear when the body dies. And the video even mentions Tibetan monks achieving the rainbow body phenomenon, which is a whole other level of consciously navigating death.
Okay, so we've got quantum physics hinting at a bigger reality. We've got people remembering past lives. And now the video connects those two. Consciousness and quantum physics. Is it possible our brains aren't just, biological computers making thoughts?
And that's what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. Like, how does a physical brain create our inner world, our thoughts, feelings, all that? Science hasn't figured that out yet. But the video brings up this or theory, where they say consciousness comes from, get this, quantum vibrations inside these tiny structures in our brain cells.
Yeah.
And if that's true, that means consciousness is tied to this quantum level of reality, which is all about interconnectedness, potential, and maybe consciousness isn't just a byproduct of the brain, but a fundamental part of the universe itself.
Yeah.
And then there's that observer effect thing, where in these experiments, just observing something at the quantum level can change what happens. Like, our consciousness is actually influencing reality.
Which is a huge deal because it means consciousness isn't just watching, it's participating. And the video goes even further, saying maybe consciousness is woven into the very fabric of the universe. That's way beyond just a materialist view of...
Definitely makes you rethink. And then there's that stuff about remote viewing, projecting your consciousness, maybe even beyond Earth. Those whistleblower accounts, they're pretty out there, but they paint a picture of what might be possible after death that goes beyond anything we've traditionally thought.
Right. And if death is more of a transition, not an ending, then maybe after death, consciousness can explore these other dimensions, other realities.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder what afterlife could really mean.
Yeah.
So let's get into reincarnation. The video tells this story about John in past life regression therapy. He remembers being a French soldier in World War I, even starts speaking French. Pretty wild. And what's important to remember is belief in reincarnation. It's not fringe. It's been around for centuries in cultures all over the world. The video talks about Hinduism, Buddhism. These traditions have always said we live multiple lives. Western science is skeptical, of course. It's hard to prove. But all these stories, all these patterns, you can't just ignore them.
Yeah, and it comes back to those kids who remember past lives with details you can actually verify. And the unlearned skills, the birthmarks or fears that seem connected to a past life trauma. Dr. Jim Tucker, he's carrying on Dr. Stevenson's work. And he's got cases like the kid who knew all about being a pilot in World War II, even guided people to where he supposedly died in his past life. Pretty compelling stuff.
And the big question, the one the video asks, why don't we all remember? Maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe if we remembered everything, it would be too overwhelming. We couldn't focus on this line.
Makes you wonder how memory even works across lifetime. Now, this next one is really out there. The Akashic Record. The video describes it as this giant cosmic cloud where every thought, feeling, everything that's ever happened, it's all stored, like a universal library.
It's almost like science fiction meets spirituality.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating is the Akashic Records, it's not a totally new idea. Ancient cultures had similar concepts like the Akasha in India, the Hall of Records in Egypt, and even some modern theories like the holographic universe kind of point in that direction, like everything is interconnected and there's this storehouse of information about everything. Think of it like the internet cloud, but instead of data, it's every thought, every emotion, ever.
And you've got mystics, psychics, claiming they can tap into it. Sarah, who says she accessed a past life as an Egyptian scribe. John, who supposedly got insights into solving an energy crisis. Definitely makes you think.
Then there's this idea that secret groups have figured out how to download skills from these records. Sounds pretty far-fetched, but the video frames it as like a yearning to access this greater knowledge, this hidden potential within us.
And if you think about it, maybe things like déjà vu or sudden insights or having a talent you can't explain, maybe that's information leaking through from this cosmic library. Makes you think maybe the brain isn't just storing our memories, it's also a receiver, picking up signals from this larger field of information.
So can you learn to access this archive? The video hints that maybe through certain mental disciplines you can. That's a pretty exciting thought.
Okay, so cosmic libraries are pretty abstract. Let's get a little more down to earth. The video talks about altered states of consciousness, meditation, psychedelics, hypnosis as doorways to other realities.
And there's a lot of research now on these altered states. and what they do to the brain. Meditation, for example, changes brainwave patterns, and people report out-of-body experiences, accessing past life memories. And psychedelics, scientists are finding they can cause profound insights, even increase happiness and well-being.
And the video talks about Dr. Michael Newton's work with hypnosis, where people under hypnosis describe the afterlife, even choosing their current life. Another perspective on consciousness beyond our physical body. There's even this thing where group meditation can apparently influence random number generators. That's wild.
But then the video goes further, saying maybe advanced meditators can use these states to influence their next life, even work through karma. So if birth and death aren't as fixed as we think, these altered states might be ways to navigate this larger reality, maybe even shape it.
Now let's go way back in time, the Egyptian Book of the Dead. The video says it's not just about death, but transformation.
Right, it's like a guidebook for the soul after death. And there's this weighing of the heart ceremony where they judge your truthfulness, your integrity, which is kind of like the life review people describe in NDEs. This idea that we're accountable for our actions, it seems to be a timeless human concern.
That connection between this ancient idea and modern near-death experiences is really fascinating. And the Book of the Dead, it teaches that death is not the end, but a doorway to becoming something greater.
So instead of just ending, it's more like you shed the old self and evolve into something new, like a continuous flow of consciousness, not a hard stop. Makes you think about how that applies to your life now.
Then there's the Kabbalion, this ancient Hermetic philosophy. They see the universe as a boundless mental universe, which means death isn't annihilation, it's just a shift in perspective, like moving between different rooms in this universal mind.
That's a pretty big shift in thinking. But if all is mind, as they say, then death isn't the end, it's just a change within this mental reality. A shift in vibration, as they explain through these Hermetic principles. Mentalism, correspondence, vibration, rhythm. Understanding these principles, the video suggests, can help you navigate life and death.
So basically, ancient wisdom for modern living and dying. And the video uses this analogy of death as a data transfer between cosmic hard drives. Pretty cool way to connect these ancient ideas to our modern world of information and technology.
It's like our consciousness, our essence, isn't just gone, it's transferred somewhere. Gives you a different way to think about what happens after death.
All right, so we've been in some pretty abstract territory. Let's talk about what actually happens when we die physically. The video mentions this discovery that the brain can actually stay active for several minutes after the heart stops. Didn't know that.
Yeah, science is always learning more. Now we understand that death isn't this one moment, but a process. Different parts of the body shut down at different times. And the brain, it might still be going even after your heart stops. Changes how we define death itself.
And that brings us back to NDEs and deathbed visions. Are those just the dying brain misfiring, or are they glimpses of something real beyond our normal perception?
When you consider how similar NDEs are, and how people in their final moments have these visions that seem so real, so meaningful, it makes you wonder if consciousness just ends when the body dies. Maybe it continues, maybe it even transforms.
And there's terminal lucidity, where someone with a severe brain disorder, right before death, they suddenly become clear-minded again. If consciousness was just the brain, how could that happen?
Yeah, that's a tough one for materialist science to explain. It suggests that maybe consciousness isn't entirely dependent on the physical brain the way we think it is. The video suggests that maybe during death, consciousness persists, maybe even expands or changes somehow.
And then there's those more fringe claims the video mentions about labs studying near death, whistleblowers talking about navigable landscapes beyond death. Gets pretty out there.
Right, and it's important to be critical of those claims, but it shows there's this growing interest in exploring consciousness and what might lie beyond what science can currently explain.
Correct.
The idea that we could actually navigate, explore these realms beyond death, that would be a huge paradigm shift.
So we've covered a lot of ground: quantum physics, ancient wisdom, the science of dying. But the video then asks this really important question. How does all this change how we live now?
And this is the key takeaway, right? Because the video says that fear of death can hold us back in life, makes us anxious, makes us put things off. We don't fully live because we're so scared of dying. But those who've had NDEs, they often say they're less afraid of death and they appreciate life more.
Makes you think, what would you do differently if you knew you only had a limited time left? The video says, ask yourself that question and then do those things now.
Facing our mortality, it can help us appreciate the present, connect with people more deeply, and live more authentically, more purposefully. Accepting death isn't about giving up on life. It's about living it more fully.
And the video talks about this idea that we carry our mental skills, our emotional maturity, our compassion into future lives, soul-level partnerships, and developing spiritual intelligence.
It's like everything we do, all the good we cultivate, it has a ripple effect, not just in this life, but maybe in future lives too. Karmic teamwork, they call it.
Now, there's this whole thing about technological immortality, uploading our minds, cryonic. The video contrasts that with the spiritual views we've been talking.
Yeah, it shows how differently we approach death. Technology wants to conquer it, while spirituality wants to understand it, integrate it.
And the video asks you, our listener, which would you, technological immortality or spiritual immortality? Big question, lots to think about.
Because technological immortality raises all sorts of ethical questions. What does it even mean to be human if you can live forever in a computer?
So as we wrap up, I think the key takeaway here is death is a mystery, but it's probably not the end.
Right. The video wants to empower you, help you see the power of your own consciousness. Don't be afraid of death, live in the present moment, and go after your dream.
And they quote Eckhart Tolle, who says, unhappiness comes from our thought, not from what's actually happening. So maybe if we change how we think about death, it can change our whole experience of life.
The video invites you to wake up to your true nature, explore your consciousness, your place in the universe. It's an ongoing journey.
So think about that phrase the video ends with, I live on. And if you want to explore these ideas more, connect with others, they mention this philosophical essence community as a resource.
We've taken this deep dive into birth and death, inspired by the philosophical essence video. And maybe the most important thing to remember is understanding death isn't about fearing the inevitable. It's about living a richer, more meaningful life, starting right now.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time.